in the high-stakes world of home building. Most companies are playing it safe right now. They're tapping the brakes, kind of waiting to see what happens with demand. But one major player, MI Homes, is doing the exact opposite. They are flooring the accelerator. So let's dive into this and unpack their incredibly bold and honestly pretty risky gamble for the spring selling season.
Right off the bat, you can see the industry is completely split. On one side, you've got competitors like KB Home and Beazer Homes, and they're pulling back. They're reducing their inventory of what are called spec homes. But MI Homes? No way. They're going in the complete opposite direction, betting big on having more of these homes ready to sell. It's a classic case of swimming against the current.
So what exactly is this spec home strategy that has the industry so divided? Well, it all comes down to building houses based on, well, a hunch.
Okay, so at its core, a spec home is a house that's built without a specific buyer lined up. The builder is literally speculating, they're guessing, that someone will come along and want to buy it, all ready to move in. It's the total opposite of a built-to-order home, where you, the buyer, are involved from day one. And listen, MI Homes isn't just dabbling in this. A whopping 75% of their total sales come from these spec homes. This is not a side bet for them. This is their entire business model. It just shows you how incredibly committed they are to this all-in approach.
So what's the logic behind this huge bet? It really boils down to a four-step play. First, they build up a big stock of homes before the busy spring season even starts. Second, they lure in buyers with some really generous incentives. And this, of course, attracts people who want a new home right now and just don't want to wait for construction. The end goal here? To keep sales moving at a steady pace, aiming for about 3 homes sold per community every single month.
But, and this is a really big but, maintaining that sales pace comes at a steep cost. This strategy forces a major financial trade-off, and when you look at the numbers, they're pretty stark.
So let's rewind the clock just 1 year. Back then, things were looking pretty solid. MI Homes had a really healthy gross profit margin of 24.6%. Now that number basically shows how much profit they make on each house before other costs kick in. And for the industry, that was a great number.
Okay, now fast forward 1 year to the most recent quarter. That same profit margin, it has absolutely plummeted to just 18.1%. That is a massive drop in profitability in a super short amount of time.
And seeing it like this, side by side, really drives home the financial hit they're taking. To keep the home selling, they're making a direct trade. They're sacrificing their profit margin for sales pace.
So what's causing this profit squeeze? Well, the biggest factor is all those incentives they need to offer to move these spec homes. The main one is something called a mortgage rate buydown. That's where MI Homes actually pays cash up front to the lender just to lower the buyer's interest rate. Getting a buyer a mortgage rate below 5% can be the key to closing a deal, but that buydown costs the company directly, eating right into their bottom line. But despite that profit squeeze, you think they might be getting nervous, right? Nope. The company's leadership is showing nothing but confidence. CEO Robert Schottenstein says they want to be, and I quote, very aggressive in having inventory ready because he believes it's the right move to take advantage of the spring market. Absolutely no second guessing going on there. So, the big question is, how is this aggressive strategy actually playing out on the ground across the country? Well, as you might guess, it's a bit of a mixed bag. In some cities, the gamble seems to be working. In others, it's turning into a real problem. The strategy is definitely paying off in a lot of markets across the Midwest and the Southeast. We're talking places like Orlando, Dallas, and Chicago are all doing pretty well. But the real pain points, they seem to be concentrated in Texas, specifically in San Antonio and Austin, where the company is facing some major headwinds. And that pain has a very specific and very large price tag. In the last quarter alone, N/Homes had to take a $51 million loss from something called impairments. That just means they had to officially write down the value of their land and unsold homes because they're no longer worth what they paid. And where did that huge loss come from? You guessed it, primarily from those underperforming communities in Austin and San Antonio.
So how did they deal with these weak markets? Well, the CFO, Philip Creek, lays it out pretty plainly. If homes aren't selling at an acceptable pace, they make the tough call and they just cut the price. It's a direct, and I'm sure often painful, solution to a very costly inventory problem. Okay, so this brings us to the real core of their decision-making. How does a company justify these kinds of high-stakes, market-by-market bets? Well, it turns out it's not all about the spreadsheets.
And this is where the strategy gets really fascinating. When they're deciding what kind of homes to build, the size, the price, the style, the CEO himself admits that the final call on who that buyer is going to be is, in his own words, a lot more art than science. A huge part of this billion-dollar strategy is actually built on intuition.
So ultimately, this whole thing comes down to balancing on a razor's edge. On one hand, they have to execute. They have to deliver enough spec homes to meet that spring demand. The risk? Creating a huge glut of unsold houses that cost them money every single day they sit empty. On the other hand, they have to maintain their sales pace. And the risk there? Their profit margins get absolutely crushed by the incentives they have to offer to make those sales happen.
And so, that leaves us with the big question, right? Is this a brilliant, aggressive move to corner a market full of buyers who want to move now? Or is it a reckless gamble that could backfire spectacularly if the economy or the housing market takes another unexpected downturn? I guess only the spring selling season will tell us for sure.